The International Men's Day is celebrated worldwide to highlight the positive value that men bring to the world, their families and communities. The day is earmarked to highlight positive role models and raise awareness of men's well-being. One of the 6 pillars of International Men's Day is to improve gender relations and promote gender equality, not only for men but for women too. The Movember initiative is to promote awareness of men's health issues. University of Stellenbosch Business School PhD candidate Kabelo Gildenhuys says that stereotyped views of men and oppositional men versus women thinking hamper men and women from finding common ground and being allies in the quest for gender equality. He adds that International Men's Day seeks to improve gender relations and promote gender equality for both men and women as one of its key pillars. Now, this year's theme, better relations between men and women. Well, for more on International Men's Day, we're now joined via Zoom by PhD student at the University of Stellenbosch Business School, Kabelo Gildenhuys. Kabelo, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
All right. So, many people would say, actually, by and large, this is a man's world. Why would we need a day dedicated to us?
Well, let me start off by saying that I completely agree with the statement that we are in the process of advancing the role of women in society. Yeah. But for that, we need men to be on board and not just in the boardroom. So I think this day is not necessarily dedicated just to the goodness of what men are, but it's also just for us to critically reflect on the role of men in society. And part of that is also as allies for women to advance in society. So I don't think men need a day on their own. I just think this day allows us to reflect also critically on the role of men. So that's how I would phrase that.
And I suppose also role modeling is really, really important. It's a sad statistic that, here in South Africa, that there are a lot of single mothers and boys are not growing up with male role models. And that can lead sometimes to some social consequences later on. I just wonder if this is the kind of thing that we need to be taking on board to become those role models and be careful of what those role models are.
Well, absolutely. And I think we also need to take a long-term view. And I mean, I'm quite conscious of the fact that there are so many things going on right now. Like focusing on gender relations is something almost on top of everything else. But we need to look towards our younger generation, also ask ourselves, are we providing new role models for young boys growing up? Of men being able to stand in harmony with women. And I think there we are definitely lacking. My research focuses now more on the workplace, but if I have to just, based on my social science background, definitely as society we are paying the price for the failure of not really creating a new male role model that is inclusive of women and, a man that feels in tune with modern day. I think that's where we struggle.
All right, let's talk a little bit more then about the space that you are working in, which is the business world. And it is a tough battleground for women. For a long time, women have been expected to act like men to succeed and move up the echelons of the boardroom. And then if they show some kind of assertiveness, it's viewed differently when the man does it to when a woman does it. How do we change this so that we get to this equality that you're talking about?
Absolutely, that's what I mean by we need to also add more complexity to the narratives around men, because I would argue from the counter that for men to show vulnerability creates the same criticism that some women who portray, shall I say, more man-like characteristics in the workplace, that also elicits critique. But on the contrary, men who are a bit more vulnerable or portray their feelings also tend to be disregarded as that is not okay. I mean, I think that's also where we need to ask ourselves, are we also providing men the space to move into something else, so that they can be on par with women in a more inclusive working environment? So I think we also need to scrutinize it the other way around.
That's fascinating. I never thought about that. But so where does it start? Where do we start to change the mindset?
Well, that's also why I say that although I'm advocating for adding complexity to the narratives around men, right, we should not fall into the trap of thinking that better relations between men and women have to be complicated. And I think that's where, for me, especially insights from the field of conflict management is so pivotal, because it really allows us to take the bigger picture and to again reflect on individual identities. You know, Peter, I think we talk so blatantly about numbers, men and women, but we forget that behind every one of those is a single story, a single grievance. And I think that's where we can start with those single stories again. I think in there we can create bridges of shared grievances between men and women.
So let's say I'm a CEO of a company today, and I'm watching this and I'm thinking, you know, Kabelo and Peter were talking about something really important. I want to change the culture in my business. Where do I even start? How do we start to conscientize people about these kinds of issues?
Well, I'm a firm believer that we lead by example, right? So if you are in charge of a group of people, I think you need to portray firstly that which you want to see in other people. I think that's why I started this conversation. We are lacking role models. And I think especially in the business world, younger adults like myself would like to see CEOs fulfilling that role of being inclusive and standing in a new position, but inclusive of others.
Do you find sometimes...
So I would say be the role model first.
Yeah. Do you find sometimes that because of these sensitivities, that sometimes you can get an overcompensation where men will start to almost treat women like children instead of respecting them as equals?
Well, I mean, that might be some people's way of coping with this change in the working environment. Definitely, that can be. But I think that's why we also need to be conscious of, if we are critiquing the way relations are between men and women, we should also be conscious of, are we providing tools for people to develop into something else? So to learn, how do I stand in a new position towards women? And if I may add, I think in South Africa we have a double journey, and that's also then when we touch on race relations, that's also where people need more tools for how do I step into a different relation with my fellow colleagues. I think sometimes we just assume people know how to do that, and it just doesn't work that way.
So this year's theme is better relations between men and women. What does that even mean?
Well, I mean, Peter, you can add whatever you want. But from my perspective, I think if we can get to a space where men and women can equally validate the dignity of one another, then we've already made a stride in the right direction. I think because the terminology of good relations is so broad, I would want to tie that to seeing the dignity in one another
does it talk about the quality of conversations, the quality of social interactions, the quality of business interactions when we are together? Because sometimes, you know, from what I've observed, often you see a split where women go to one corner in a room, men perhaps go to another corner, and the subjects of the conversations then become quite different.
Well, I think that's then where we need to make conscious efforts that we challenge that habit of going into silos, right? But that's why I'm also advocating that we need to equip people then to move into something else. I think that's sometimes where the equipping is lacking behind. So we cannot just expect people to be like thrown together and now everything should just be fine. Like it doesn't work that way. We need to equip people to move into that new role and that new relation to one another.
All right. So you're doing quite a bit of research, and I just wonder, what is the maybe one or two big things that keep coming up for you that are a concern?
Well, there are many. But what I would emphasize, because I look specifically at diversity management in organizations, I would say that what I fail to see is a constructive role being created for men. So we've been in the process of challenging the position of men, and that's good, and we need to continue on that. But I think what's lacking is also equally now providing that new role into which men should step into. So you have a lot of work being done on men as allies, but that's very small in comparison to the critique towards men. But I think we need to start now working on the more constructive, the more helpful way of also providing the tools for that new role.
I know that your work is around business, but maybe we can extrapolate the attitudes perhaps into society. The crime stats in South Africa came out today, and it's shocking to hear that 10,000 women were raped in the last 3 months in South Africa. That's one woman every 15 minutes. And that talks to a certain mindset that men have about how they can treat women. And that's a social thing that for sure, but I'm pretty sure that that same mindset then exists in other forms, in business, in life in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific. And the fact that we have to talk about that still in 2021, that violence against women is still, that nothing has really improved, basically. That's actually what we're saying. But that's why I can only go back to what I say, that we need to acknowledge the dignity in one another. And I think the only opportunity we have long term is to invest in our young men, our boys growing up, to equip them with a different understanding of human relations. And I think for me, and this might just be my heart speaking, but I think that's then where we need to focus on love. And I don't want to minimize all of the hard things, but we need to equip our young men to first also be heart-centered. I almost want to believe that that's long-term, that's the way. Because it's just, there's just so many variables, but I would want to say we need to invest in our young men growing up. They still have an opportunity to be something else.
We've run out of time, but one final question, if you can answer quickly. Self-image, I guess, also is another issue that men have to deal with and process, because where it is challenged, where it is weak, it can translate into many things externally.
Absolutely, and I think we're underestimating under what pressure also men are falling, just with the whole self-image. I think women have had that pressure for a long time, but increasingly in this day and age, men with the whole social media, men increasingly also are more worried just about their social appearance. And I think we underestimate the health consequences of that. Absolutely.
Kabelo, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much indeed for giving us your time and sharing your thoughts with us.
No, thank you. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Take care. All right. That's Kabelo Gildenhuys speaking to us all the way from Colombia. And it's Men's Day today, Men's International Day, and a day for us, I guess, to reflect on our role as men in society, and particularly when it comes to relations between men and women. A lot of work probably still needs to be done, given the things that we see around us. You're watching The Globe on the SABC News Channel. Stay with us. Still so much more to come.